I still remember the night I first encountered the horror that would forever change my life. It was a night of bitter cold and relentless rain, a night when the very walls of my existence seemed to close in around me. I write these words now from the trembling solitude of my small apartment, hoping that by sharing my experience, I might warn others of the unspeakable darkness that lurks just beyond the veil of our everyday reality. I had always been a skeptic. Ghost stories, urban legends, and airy tales were nothing more than fodder for my imagination, a way to spice up mundane evenings. But that was before I found myself alone in a decrepit house on the outskirts of a forgotten town. A house whose history was as murky as the stagnant water that pooled beneath its rotting porch. I had inherited the property from a relative I barely remembered, a man who vanished without explanation, leaving behind only a dilapidated mansion and a stack of cryptic letters. Desperate for solitude and a break from the chaos of my life, I decided to make the house my temporary refuge. The drive to the house was uneventful but for the oppressive grey sky and the constant patter of rain against the windshield. I recalled nothing but vague memories of childhood visits to a place that felt like home, only to be replaced by a sense of foreboding as I drew closer. The mansion loomed before me like a relic from another world, its silhouette jagged against the turbulent sky. Its windows, dark and uninviting, seemed to watch my every move with an unsettling intensity. I arrived late in the afternoon, the house shrouded in an airy twilight despite the passing of day. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. With little more than a duffel bag and a determination to uncover the secrets of my family's past, I stepped through the creaking front door. A chill ran down my spine as I crossed the threshold, as though the house itself exhaled a cold, mournful sigh. The foyer was a cavernous space, filled with dust and the faint smell of mold. The wallpaper, once ornate and beautiful, hung in tattered strips, and the floorboards groaned underfoot with every hesitant step I took. As I explored the house, I was struck by an overwhelming sense of loneliness. Every room seemed frozen in time, preserving memories of a life-long past. I could almost hear faint echoes of laughter and whispers in the halls, though I told myself it was merely the wind whistling through broken windows. Yet, as dusk fell and shadows grew longer, those whispers became unmistakable, murmurs that seemed to come from the very walls. I set up a small room for myself in what used to be a parlor. The furniture was antique, its once vibrant fabrics now faded and threadbare. I lit a few candles, their flickering flames battling the oppressive gloom, and attempted to settle in with a book. But sleep eluded me as I lay on the creaking bed, my mind a whirlwind of anxious thoughts. Every creak, every whisper of wind, was magnified in the quiet of the night. At around midnight, I awoke to a sound that froze my blood, a soft, insistent tapping at the window. My heart pounded in my chest as I pulled the covers up, straining to see through the dim light. The tapping grew louder, rhythmic, almost as if someone, or something, was trying to get my attention. I forced myself to rise and approach the window, my legs heavy with dread. Outside, all I saw was darkness and the relentless rain. Yet the tapping persisted, echoing through the silence like a desperate plea. I shut the window firmly, hoping the sound would cease. But no matter what I did, the tapping continued, a slow, methodical drumming that seemed to synchronize with the beating of my heart. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing more than the wind, but deep down, I knew that I was not alone. The next day, the storm had passed, leaving behind an airy calm. I decided to explore the rest of the house, searching for clues about my missing relative and the strange history that seemed to seep from every crevice. In the attic, among piles of dusty old belongings and forgotten trinkets, I discovered a leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with frantic, barely legible scrolls describing horrifying visions and encounters with entities beyond comprehension. One entry, in particular, caught my eye. They come in the dark, whispering secrets of an ancient curse. The house is alive with their presence. I fear for my soul as the whispers grow louder each night. I can feel their cold hands upon me, and I know there is no escape. A chill ran through me as I read those words. I felt as if the journal were a window into a past life, a life that I was now inexplicably a part of. The air around me seemed to thicken, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched by unseen eyes. That night, the house transformed. The familiar creaks and groans of the old building took on a sinister tone, and the once comforting glow of the candles seemed to flicker with an unholy energy. I sat in my makeshift study, the journal spread open before me, trying to piece together the fragmented memories of a family I barely knew. As midnight approached once again, I could feel the oppressive weight of the darkness closing in around me. Then, the whispering began. At first, it was soft and indistinct, a murmur that seemed to emanate from the very walls. I tried to focus on my breathing, telling myself that it was just my imagination, a byproduct of the isolation and fear. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until I could make out words. They spoke of pain, of regret, of a deep and ancient sorrow that had haunted this place for generations. I felt my skin crawl as the voices echoed in my mind, each syllable a dagger of ice. I grabbed my phone, desperate to record the voices, but when I turned on the recorder, all that came through was static. In that moment, I realized that the house was not merely haunted by memories, it was alive with a malevolent presence. I could feel it around me, a cold, suffocating force that seeped into my bones and chilled my very soul. For the next few nights, the torment intensified. I would hear footsteps pacing the empty halls, see fleeting shadows darting just out of the corner of my eye, and sense an ever-present gaze upon me. I began to dread the nightfall, for with it came the awakening of the darkness that resided within these walls. Sleep became a distant memory as the nightmares bled into my waking hours. One particularly harrowing night, I woke to find the door to my room ajar, though I was certain I had locked it before retiring. My heart hammered as I crept out into the corridor, the floorboards creaking underfoot as if protesting my intrusion. The corridor was bathed in an otherworldly glow, a pale, ethereal light that seemed to emanate from nowhere. In the distance, I could hear the sound of a child's laughter, high-pitched and airy, echoing through the silence. I followed the sound, driven by a mix of terror and a desperate need for answers. I reached a door at the end of the hall, its surface scarred with deep, unrecognizable symbols. The laughter grew louder as I hesitantly pushed it open, revealing a room that defied all logic. It was small, with walls covered in cryptic symbols and an antique mirror that seemed to ripple like water. In the reflection, I saw not only myself but also the faint outline of a child, its eyes dark and empty, smiling in a way that chilled me to the core. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a chair, as the laughter crescendoed into a cacophony of tormented screams. In that moment, I understood that the house had been a prison for a tortured soul, perhaps even a fragment of my own bloodline, forever trapped in a cycle of anguish. The realization shook me to my very core. I could no longer deny that I was connected to this curse, that my fate was intertwined with the malevolent history of the mansion. And as the realization set in, the whispers turned into outright pleas for help, and then into angry, vengeful shouts that rattled the very foundations of the house. Desperation drove me to search for a way to break the curse, to silence the voices that now haunted every moment of my existence. I scoured the journals, letters, and cryptic inscriptions scattered throughout the mansion. One piece of paper, yellowed with age and scrawled in trembling handwriting, spoke of a ritual, a way to appease the restless spirits and sever the bonds of the curse. The instructions were vague, shrouded in symbolic language, but they hinted at a sacrifice, an offering of something precious to the soul of the house. I agonized over the decision. The thought of performing a ritual filled me with dread, yet the torment was unbearable. I resolved that if it meant freeing myself from this nightmare, I had no choice. The following night, as the wind howled like a chorus of lost souls outside, I gathered the items described in the cryptic note: a faded photograph of a smiling child, a lock of hair, and a small, antique locket that had once belonged to my ancestor. With trembling hands, I arranged the objects on an old, ornate table in the heart of the mansion. I began the ritual, reading aloud the words inscribed in the journal. My voice trembled as I uttered each syllable, feeling the weight of history and despair press upon me. As I spoke, the room grew unnaturally cold, and the shadows seemed to twist and contort, forming shapes that defied comprehension. For a moment, I felt as if I were no longer alone, as if unseen eyes were watching me from the darkness. Then, a sudden, deafening silence fell over the room. The oppressive energy that had plagued me for weeks seemed to pause, as though holding its breath. I looked at the objects on the table. They glowed faintly with an otherworldly light, and I could sense a presence stirring in the very air around me. It was then that I felt it, a searing pain in my chest, as if my very soul were being pulled from me. I sunk to the floor, gasping for breath, as visions flooded my mind. I saw flashes of a life-long past, hazy images of laughter, love, and unimaginable sorrow. I saw the face of the child from the mirror, its smile now twisted with despair, and I heard the anguished cries of those who had been trapped within these walls for eternity. In that moment, I understood the true cost of the curse. The price of freedom was far greater than I could have ever imagined. Time lost all meaning as I writhed on the cold stone floor, the spectral figures of the past swirling around me in a dance of torment. The whispers grew louder, until they were almost unbearable, a relentless barrage of voices that clawed at my sanity. And just when I thought I could endure no more, the room exploded in a blinding flash of light. I awoke with a start, drenched in sweat and trembling uncontrollably. The ritual had ended, but its effects lingered like a dark stain on my soul. The mansion was quiet now, as if the malevolent force had been banished. Yet I knew in my heart that the horror was far from over. The curse had been broken, for now, but the scars it left behind would haunt me for the rest of my days. In the days that followed, I tried to return to a semblance of normal life. I sold the mansion to a buyer who promised to restore its former glory, and I attempted to bury the memories deep within my mind. But every night, as I lay in the safety of my own bed, I could still hear the whispers. I could still see the ghostly faces in the mirror. The nightmares persisted, vivid and unrelenting, a constant reminder that some horrors never truly fade away. Now, as I write these words, I can feel the weight of that dark night pressing upon me. I often wonder if the curse was ever truly lifted, or if it merely slumbered, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The shadows in my apartment seem to shift when I'm not looking, and on stormy nights, I sometimes catch a glimpse of a child's sad, haunted eyes in the reflection of a window. I have learned that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. The horror of that night remains with me, an indelible mark on my soul. And though I try to move forward, I know that the whispers in the darkness will never truly be silenced. They serve as a constant reminder of the fragility of our reality and of the monstrous secrets that lie just beyond the veil of our understanding. So if you ever find yourself alone in an old, creaking house, and the night seems to whisper your name, remember my story. Listen carefully and heed the warnings of the past. For in the darkness, where the boundaries between the living and the dead blur, the horrors of yesterday are never far behind. Even now, in the quiet moments before sleep, I feel their cold breath on my neck, and I wonder, will I ever be free of the shadows that haunt me? Or am I doomed to forever walk the line between reality and nightmare, a prisoner of my own terror? I do not know the answer, but I do know this: the horror is real, and it is waiting, patient, insidious, and unrelenting. As I lay in bed that night, the silence of the mansion felt almost unnatural. Yet, every creak, every whisper, seemed to signal that something was waiting just beyond my reach. Even though the curse appeared broken, the lingering sensation that I was never truly freed gnawed at me. The faint sound of footsteps echoed somewhere deep inside the walls, impossible to ignore. My heart pounded, and the weight of unseen eyes pressed on me, daring me to acknowledge the truth. Then, just as I began to drift off, the mirror in my bedroom flickered, its surface rippling as if something stirred within it. I could see the faint outline of a child's face, just as I had seen in that terrible reflection before. Only this time, the child's eyes were no longer empty. They were watching me alive with unsettling awareness. I reached out, trembling, but the mirror reflected nothing now, just the room in its silent, empty stillness. But I knew better. It wasn't over. It had never been over. As the air grew heavy around me, and the lights began to flicker, I heard it again, the laughter. And I was left with one thought. The curse wasn't broken. It's only just begun. In the lingering hush of that final night, I lay awake, haunted by the nagging certainty that the curse had never truly left. Every creak of the old floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside, seemed to signal that a deeper, darker force was stirring, one that was biding its time in the silence. The ritual might have subdued the immediate terror, but it left behind a residue of dread that pulsed through the very walls of the mansion. As midnight approached once again, the atmosphere grew heavy and oppressive. In the stillness, I distinctly heard a soft murmur, a whispered promise that what I had experienced was only the beginning. My heart pounded as I sensed an unseen presence drawing ever closer, a silent observer waiting to reclaim its dominion over this cursed place. I clutched the worn journal to my chest, feeling the weight of ancient secrets pressing upon me. I now stand on the precipice of an even greater horror, teetering between desperate hope and unyielding dread. The darkness is gathering, and I know with chilling certainty that part 2 is imminent, and it will reveal truths far more terrifying than I ever imagined.